Many state highways that have been affected here this morning. But again, I-10 is a federal interstate highway. So, Mike and Linda, it'll be fixed a lot quicker than the others.
Better than we thought.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting that the retrofitting of the freeways and the structural repair and I guess prevention they're doing that now. It's ongoing. So there's still areas that are very, very vulnerable.
There certainly are, and in the days and the weeks ahead, as you're sitting there in traffic, because you've been routed around one of these areas and it's taking you so much longer to get to work, I doubt if you will have too many reservations about your tax dollars going to retrofit these freeways.
A very vivid picture.
Here you see what happens when you don't.
Right. And this is, although it is amazing to think that it's only going to take about 6 to 8 months to get this back going. You're seeing some, just some little headlines here on the screen to help you know what's going on, what we do know now. Of course, major power outages throughout the Southern California, Los Angeles area. Major gas leaks. They are the reason for most of the fires that we have seen and been showing you, especially in the San Fernando Valley around Northridge. A live picture right here of the nation's busiest freeway cut down.
Although you were talking about this retrofitting, even that is no guarantee. We've had a couple of freeways collapse this morning that were fairly new freeways. The 14 collapsed at the 5, the 118 freeway collapsed.
Those were east-west freeways.
Those were east, and those were the ones that were the most vulnerable, although the seismic expert who joined us a little while ago, but the seismic expert told us that even our best buildings and freeways are vulnerable. And those are the newer ones, of course, but those that are not as new, middle-aged or older buildings, those are really, really dangerous in the event of an earthquake and unpredictable. And we've asked a couple of a structural engineer and a seismic expert now, what is...
I'm not altogether clear whether it really is a new fault line or simply one that they had not detected before, but as you see those concentric circles, that is the epicenter there where the arrow is, Northridge and the San Fernando Valley. And it is in that region that houses were collapsed in on themselves, buildings have collapsed in on themselves, sections of highway have collapsed in on themselves, where earlier this morning there were natural gas leaks which ultimately exploded into fires and wiped out whole neighborhoods there. The fire department not only had the problem of access, of trying to reach the area, but also had the problem of being afraid to extinguish the fires because the natural gas itself constitutes more of a danger because you can't see it, you can't smell it, and there it is, and it can be terribly toxic. But most of those fires now appear to be out. We have heard from one of our experts with whom we've spoken throughout the course of the day that, of course, the problem is yet to come down the road. Reestablishing, I mean, you're going to get water lines and sewer lines that are going to be mixing in with one another. That's going to constitute a major problem in the days and weeks to come, but it's the kind of problem you don't focus on until the immediate disaster is handled and taken care of. Gentlemen, tell me where we're going to be able to go from here on in. We were going to show you a piece of video of the tape room. This is part of the General Hospital set, which is actually, well, Judy Muller, if you're there, this is literally just a few feet from where you're sitting. Why don't you describe this for us?
Well, yes, this is the studio on this lot where we also have our news bureau here in, well, it's East Hollywood, basically. And they've had a partial roof collapsed at the studio of General Hospital as well as a water main break. And so it's flooded. I don't believe they were set to tape today because it's a holiday. They tape a few days a week and then are gone. So I don't know what this will do to the schedule of General Hospital, but it's something of an irony that in a town that whose main industry is to recreate drama, this has been a year where we didn't need much of the fiction. We have so much reality going on that it's quite amazing. That was just as you said, around the corner from where I'm sitting now. Here in the Bureau, we've had not a lot of damage, but everything's off the walls in the library, and I haven't even been up to my office. Actually, I just happened to think of that. I should go up and see if there are any paintings left on the walls.
And tell me, in terms of the aftershocks, you've experienced quite a few of them. You've told me about them either as they're happening or shortly after they've happened. So far, they seem to have been very, very mild, but there is still the danger, of course, and the prediction that there will be worse ones.
That's correct, and they're saying that within the next 72-hour period, we could have aftershocks that are as large as 5 on the Richter scale. Now, don't throw me any more questions about how that works out scientifically, but I can tell you that a 5 on a Richter scale would be enough to stop regular programming in Los Angeles for a cut-in of news. That's a big quake here on any normal day. Today, it's an aftershock. A few weeks from now, it'll be big news again, probably.
Judy, let's eavesdrop on what our colleagues over at WABC are doing. That's a live picture from the WABC helicopter. WABC is here on the East Coast, KABC in Los Angeles. Let's pick up on what they're talking about.
Busy trying to check on the structural integrity of the places they expect to open as shelters for tonight. And so there's not a complete list of those shelters yet, but if you want information, here's a number you can call. I'm not sure.
Heard the interview in Los Angeles with a water authority expert who said, please boil your water, as people in Los Angeles are being advised to do, and recommended against any attempts at self-purification. Chlorine pills are one method for doing that, but any reference that was overheard to adding bleach to water was ruled as extremely unwise. So that is the bottom line. Very unwise. Don't try self-purification. We will be continuing NBC News continuous coverage of the earthquake. We'll be with you throughout the afternoon. Tom Brokaw is en route to Los Angeles. Nightly news will come to you from Los Angeles tonight, and our primetime coverage will continue to follow the effects of Earthquake 94. For now, we'll take a short break and be back after this message.
Well, the first time I tried it, it was like, whoa.
And you're seeing signs of this basically all along this stretch of Balboa. How far it extends, I'm not sure, but they have basically curtailed traffic going through here and are not allowing anyone to drive through. Residents are, as you can see, staying outside, watching from the fronts of their houses. It does smell very strongly of gas right now, and Carlos, as you mentioned, they have turned off the gas, but they're allowing the residual gas to burn out from that fire that you can see down on the other end. And that's basically all they can do. They can just stand there and watch it. They've done all they can do, and they expect it'll burn out sometime in the next couple of hours. They're just not sure how much gas is left in that main gas line.
Michelle, is it safe to assume that right there they're without water and power?
Yes, they are definitely without power. I do not know that they're without water.
I know we are, and it's kind of frustrating to watch that water pouring out of there. There's been no water here since the quake.
In fact, let me just ask this resident right here about whether or not he's got water. Excuse me, sir, do you have water in your house right now? You do have water service?
No, there's no water service. We've got bottled water.
You have no water and no power?
No power, no water, no electricity. We've got telephones.
Oh, your telephones are working now. You're able to call out and receive calls in?
And receive calls.
But
that's it.
So how did your house fare through the earthquake?
We've got some structural damage here in the corner of the baby's room. Other than that, we seem to be fine. The whole inside of the house is destroyed, but that's just stuff.
Things that have fallen over and...
Yeah, every dish in the house was broken. China cabinet came down. All of that stuff's gone. But it's all replaceable.
So have you talked with your neighbors at all and found out how they're doing?
Yeah, they're doing okay over here, and the neighbors over here were out of town. So we just went over and shut their gas lines off, and they won't believe it when they walk in. Their house is a mess.
Yeah. Thanks for talking with us.
When we come back, we'll take another look at how this day started at 4:31 a.m. Pacific time.
If you suffer from sinus pain and pressure, take Dristan Sinus. It contains...
And we'll also send you our exciting Private Pleasures video, absolutely free.
Not available anywhere else.
Collect this exclusive video of your favorite Playmate. So call now for Playboy and your free video.
And discover our secrets, because we want to make you happy.
BET.
It happened 7 hours and 25 minutes ago, roughly, maybe 7 hours, 24 minutes. The it was an earthquake, and now 17 people are confirmed dead. The earthquake struck Southern California this morning. Let's look at this report from Deborah Zara.
It rattled millions of people from their sleep around 4:30 Monday morning. A powerful earthquake centered in Northridge in the San Fernando Valley, roughly 20 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles. Homes and apartment buildings crumbled, some freeways collapsed, train cars derailed and flipped over. Police and fire officials believe dozens of people could still be trapped in their cars or homes. Governor Pete Wilson already is asking the Federal Emergency Management Agency for help.
All of a sudden, the whole station started shaking, and all I could think was the door. Just, get to the door, opened the door, came outside. I started going towards the street. I looked back, and all of a sudden, I heard the sound. And if you can see, the building next door just, came on, tumbled on top of the station.
So our roof started shaking earlier. Dressers went flying everywhere. Dishes are all over the floor. So our house is pretty messed up. But I've never seen, that was the biggest earthquake I've been in.
If you smell gas, get out. Don't be in there if you smell gas, but you're going to kind of have to help yourself. All right, we're committed behind here. We're not going to be able to help you for a little while.
More than 50 fires are now burning in the Los Angeles area, many of them caused by natural gas pipeline ruptures. Water, power, and phone lines are also down in much of the area. Residents here, needless to say, are rattled, fearful of a strong aftershock.
Come on, get the rhythm back. Let's get the rhythm back. Keep going.
Seismologists say this was a powerful quake because it centered only 9 miles beneath the surface of the earth.
We live above a garage and then 3 stories above, and that's pretty much buckled under.
We've had a major gas leak. We can't control the gas right now, and we've got 5 houses burning right now. No water supply, and we're by ourselves.
They didn't have enough water pressure to break through the window, so they're only pouring it up on the roof. So the whole fire had like a half an hour or 45 minutes to build inside the building.
That's my door. I was standing underneath that doorway to get protection, and I opened the door to see if he was okay. That's the door that fell right in front of me.
The jolts were felt as far south as San Diego and nearly 300 miles east in Las Vegas. People in Los Angeles are now cleaning up, hoping this is the last of a frightening and nerve-shattering episode. Deborah Zara for CNN, Los Angeles.
Frightening and nerve-shattering, 2 descriptions of what we've gone through in your city. I'm Bernard Shaw. It started for me at 4:31 this morning. I'm going to stand aside now. Frank Sesno will be sitting in here very shortly as CNN continues its live coverage of this earthquake in Southern California. The death toll right now, 17 dead and scores injured.
Had it not been such a shallow quake, we heard the seismologist discussing this earlier. This one was fairly shallow in terms of how far beneath the surface it was centered, and therefore the damage was not as great as it might have been. Still, throughout the Los Angeles area, scenes like the ones you're about to see are being replayed over and over again. This is in Granada Hills, which is in the northern part of the San Fernando Valley, a major population center in Los Angeles, and in the center of the screen, you see the flames from broken gas mains. When the earth moved, lines ruptured, sparks started fires, and many of them continue to burn. This is an apartment complex or some kind of commercial structure, I think, that has collapsed. Well, this is the Kaiser Permanente office building in Granada Hills, California. Fortunately, the quake hit very early in the morning and no one was at work, but you can see the enormity of the damage to the structure itself. Keep in mind, this community is very near the epicenter. A lot of the damage is greater the closer you are to the center of the earthquake. Here's another look at street scene fire coming from a gas main, also in Granada Hills. And in nearby Northridge, we're told that there's a rescue underway. A parking structure collapsed, and a man who was working on the bottom level of it, a street cleaner of some kind, was caught in the middle of this. They tell us he is alive. They've run an air hose down to him. They're using timbers and airbags to try and lift some of the crushing debris off of him, and at the moment we're told he is still alive. These are pictures of homes, fences, back walls have collapsed. Boy, when the sun came up, many people were in for a very, very rude surprise when they looked outside. A lot of the damage depends on the kind of soil on which your house is built. The softer the soil, the more damage tends to be. Here's a homeowner describing the shock he saw when he woke up and looked out at the backyard this morning. Again, as you said, the death toll here is 18, and half of those deaths took place in an apartment building in the San Fernando Valley that collapsed. 9 people dead so far there. The rescue teams are looking for survivors in the rubble of what once was a large populated apartment building in the northern San Fernando Valley.
Bill, you have covered the fires. You've covered so many natural disasters in the Los Angeles area. I mean, I tell you, Southern California just gets hit again and again by these disasters, but an earthquake is one of those that is so unexpected. A fire you begin to hear about. Brush fires certainly hit very quickly, but this earthquake is in a special category of its own.
It is because of the violence of it. I mean, it shakes you out of your sleep, it throws you out of bed, and you don't know how big it's going to be until it's over. These are pictures from Sherman Oaks, California, which is also in the San Fernando Valley, about 5 miles from the epicenter of the quake, and this is busy Ventura Boulevard, which is a main thoroughfare there, and there were a lot of fires in some of the small businesses there. And as you can see, fire trucks were out all over the city trying to put them out. You know, you talk about the disasters that those of us living here in California face. We like to think that we live on the edge. Literally, we live on the edge of the continent, and sometimes we live on the edge by choosing to live here in the face of all of the blows that Mother Nature deals us from time to time. We do learn to live with it, and sometimes we don't take it as seriously as we should. I'll tell you a case in point. 3 out of 4 of the homes that were damaged in this earthquake today were not insured. And earthquake insurance is relatively inexpensive in California, yet most residents choose not to buy it. They won't be able to for at least another month now, because you can't buy earthquake insurance immediately after a quake. But I'd venture to say that 30 days from now, Californians will be back to our attitudes as normal, that this is one of the things we live with. It's the price we pay for living in paradise. You know, it's about 75 degrees here right now. That's why people live here. We love it.
Bill, let me jump in here for a second. You said something earlier.
Richard Reardon at a joint news conference at which presumably they will be discussing some of the efforts that are being made both to rescue the injured, to recover the dead, and perhaps for the moment most important, take care of the living, those who have been dispossessed, those whose homes have been destroyed, and those who are desperately going to need help over the next few days and weeks in California. At the moment, we are looking at a death toll of about 21, we're looking at a death toll of 21, but unfortunately, that number just seems to be creeping up as the day progresses and as firefighters begin to look through the wreckage. We're looking here at videotape that was shot. No, actually what we're looking at is a live picture, I am told, from, again, our affiliate, KABC out in Los Angeles, a helicopter shot. And as you can see, there is still a fire that looks as though it may be coming from a ruptured gas line still going on down there in the street. As we are talking, because I have him on the phone as we're watching these pictures, let me bring in Colonel Bruce Roy, who is the Public Affairs Officer of the California National Guard in Sacramento. Colonel Roy, I don't know if you have access to a picture, but quite clearly you have a very good sense of what's been going on in and about the Los Angeles area. What is it that the California National Guard is doing right now to try and help alleviate some of the suffering?
Good afternoon, Ted. The Governor's Office of Emergency Services asked that the National Guard activate this morning to be prepared to respond to missions as they are assigned to us. Right now, we're recalling approximately 1,500 soldiers in the Los Angeles area, to include both Army and Air National Guard in a variety of areas. We've got.
It was a lower priority structure because it had multiple supports to it.
Doctor, we're talking about 23 years since the 71 quake. People may be thinking right now, how long does it take to take care of our infrastructure and get it retrofitted, get it up to speed?
Get it right. Get it right, okay. And I don't know the answer to that, obviously, and I share the concern that everyone has. We should be able to feel that our infrastructure is there and in place when we need it. And that's certainly a goal that I'm sure every person in the state of California has that has anything to do with these structures. I know Caltrans is working very hard to do that. There was a report after the Loma Prieta earthquake that one of our faculty members here, Professor George Hausner, chaired the governor's panel, and they came up with a number of recommendations to strengthen the highway system, and I know that they were taken to heart, and I know that they're being implemented. There's always a question that we could do things faster, and basically if we had the money, we could make progress at a lot faster pace, but there are a lot of things that compete for the same dollars. We have social problems and a lot of other problems that society wants taken care of. Earthquake safety is only one, and how do we balance those? Well, that's a social issue.
But in a bigger question, I mean, can you really design a system of bridges, of roadways, et cetera, that's going to be earthquake-proof, that it's not going to fall down, period?
As we've said many times, there's no such thing as an earthquake-proof building, and there's no such thing as an earthquake.
This truck right here, this white dually, right? We had the water, I guess the line broke or something like that, and what happened was this truck tried to shoot through it, ended up igniting the fire somehow, and it blew up. We were all out here, it knocked us all down.
I don't know. What about the people in the truck? Do you know the person in the truck?
I believe they're deceased. I'm not sure.
I don't
know. One of them jumped out of the truck. He was on fire when he jumped out of the truck. The driver. There was a passenger. What happened was this was all just water that was first just shooting into the air about 75 feet. And we set up these little stalls, you know, these little posts, the cones to just stop people from coming in. This guy came in through that side, and it was just a poof. It wasn't an explosion. It just went, and then just fire. It's just straight in the air.
Now the process of mopping up and cleaning up is underway. We want to join our affiliate KTLA now. They're in the process of watching the rubble being dug out in one area as they talk with a seismologist about the process of earthquaking buildings and roadways, the risks involved. Let's listen.
That, of course, concerns you because we should have learned our lessons and been able to take care of that. Now, I don't know, though, without further analysis, what the...
Have aircraft from the 146th Airlift Wing in Southern California that can come up here to Northern California and take soldiers and airmen down south as necessary and transport additional firefighters and law enforcement people as well, if they are needed.
Some of these incredible pictures that we're looking at, we spent quite a bit of time a few moments ago talking about that tractor trailer and what that scene must have been like when he screamed to a halt just before that break in the overpass there. But live helicopter shots now from our colleagues over at KABC in Los Angeles. And you are just sort of getting an impressionistic sense from the broken overpasses to the collapsed buildings to the shots of people walking around a little bit dazed of what has happened here since that earthquake first broke some 7 hours and 40 minutes ago when the earthquake rocked Southern California at 4:31 this morning. It has just been a day in which, piece by piece, we are beginning to get a sense of the impact that it has had on people down there, on the buildings, and gradually, as the information is gathered together and funneled through different sources, whether it's the wire services, our affiliate on the scene, our own reporters as they're gathering information, we will be in a better position then to tell you in terms of an overview of what has happened. But as things stand right now, we believe that there are 21 dead. The wounded, we have never gotten really even an approximate figure of those who have been injured by the earthquake, but it seems to be in the many hundreds because the hospitals are absolutely flooded with people flocking in, and each hospital is now going through the process of triage where they take the most serious cases and then defer those who are more slightly injured. But as we gather that information, we'll be giving it to you, and indeed, as new information breaks, we'll be bringing it to you. I'll be back in a moment.
ABC News live coverage of the California earthquake will continue in a moment.
At 5 a.m., all the Millers can think about is that first get-you-going cup of coffee. That eye-opening, fill-the-kitchen aroma of Folgers crystals. It all begins with mountain-grown beans, fresh brewed, then crystallized, for a deep, dark, rich coffee just waiting to become your well.
Zones. I thought I'd give you an update on the earthquake. President Clinton was informed about the earthquake this morning by Secretary Cisneros, who called him around 8 o'clock. Told him about the situation. The president then called his brother in Los Angeles, Roger Clinton, to make sure that he was okay, which he was, just to get an assessment from him about events that had transpired. He then turned on the television and watched, flipped around from channel to channel, watching developments there. Meanwhile, the White House was informed early this morning as the earthquake was happening. Christine Varney and others, Mac McClarty, were notified, and they began to put the sort of response process in motion. Mac talked with FEMA Director James Lee Witt, who began coordinating federal assistance immediately. The President then notified people that he wanted to be briefed in more detail at about 11 o'clock. So he came in about 10, was brought up to date again by Mac McClarty, was briefed in more detail at 11 o'clock, at which time he placed calls to James Lee Witt, who told him he was on his way out there, had already been in touch with people on the ground, both state and local officials. The President then called Mayor Reardon and told him that he was watching the situation closely, that his heart and the hearts of everybody in the country was going after the people of Southern California, and that the White House would work and the federal government would work as closely as they could with state and local officials. The President then spoke to Governor Wilson, and the governor informed him that a disaster declaration would be coming today, and the President said he would sign that as quickly as he could. We expect that this afternoon, and we hope to have the President sign it this afternoon, and we will provide some kind of a forum for that, probably 5 or 5:30. Andrea? What would that it will sort of launch a number of programs. Basically, it will provide low-interest loans for the replacement of homes, businesses, and personal property. Those are provided by FEMA, SBA, and the Economic Development Association, which is part of Commerce. There'll be additional cash grants provided by FEMA. Longer-term disaster housing, up to 18 months for people who lose their homes. Clearly, we don't know yet how many people that will affect. That's coordinated by HUD and FEMA. There's other programs, including emergency food stamps, disaster unemployment assistance, and crisis counseling. And finally, public assistance for rebuilding roads, bridges. It's too early to say. James Lee Witt and Secretary Cisneros are on their way out there now, as is John Emerson. Mac McClarty asked John Emerson, who's a deputy assistant here at the White House, to go to coordinate White House efforts on the ground. Christine Varney, who is the cabinet secretary here in the White House, is coordinating events here. The President asked James Lee to call him and to stay in close touch with him when he arrives out there. He's expected to leave right about now, weather permitting, arriving in Los Angeles around 8 or 8:30 tonight. If the local officials there, the state and local officials, and James Lee and others believe the President can be useful, we'll certainly take a look at that.
Maybe this week?
Again, it will depend on assessment of things on the ground. I think the President is waiting to hear from them. Secretary Pena is also on his way out there. He was in Birmingham today. He left from there and is expected to arrive in Los Angeles around 6. Not expected. There is somebody from Commerce going. Assistant Secretary of Commerce Larry Parks, who's with the Economic Development Administration. Unfortunately, I have not been able to reach my own family. As you know, many of you know, I'm from there. I did hear from friends of the family. My family is fine. The house is not in such good shape, as are a number of people. My parents live in San Canyon, which is quite close to the intersection of the 14 and 5 freeways where the interchange collapsed. The house has suffered quite a bit of superficial damage, and it's unclear to me whether there's any structural damage, so it's a mess. My parents are fine, thank you. This is my parents' house, yeah. Yeah. So, others in the neighborhood I grew up, there's a lot of damage in my hometown. Unclear. I think the northern San Fernando Valley appears to be hardest hit. And I think it'll take some time before we know exactly what the damage is, again, which is why the President has sent a team out.
We have just had a very large and significant aftershock here as Dee Dee Myers spoke. It lasted for probably 4 or 5 seconds. John Garamendi, you're still with me, you think? 10 seconds, pushing it. It was a rocking motion here that we felt in the studio.
Still going.
In fact, I feel it's still going.
Yeah. That was a good one.
Yeah, it depends how you define good, I suppose.
Well, it didn't knock anything else off your shelf here. I noticed you do have one vase from before.
Yes, we do, apparently from before. But again, now I know you're... Am I feeling it still? Yeah. I believe I am.
Yes, you are.
I know you're not a seismologist, but you've studied this and you're very familiar with it because you live with it. These aftershocks now will continue for a period of days and weeks even, correct?
That's correct. We always see this pattern. You see a big shock. Usually, maybe there's a few foreshocks, smaller ones, which perhaps we saw in the Santa Monica Bay last week. And then you get a big one, and then you get a series of aftershocks. This one that we just had is going to go up there probably in the 5 or 6 range, I would guess.
That was a big one. Now, the danger, of course, is that several of the structures that were damaged to a significant but not collapsing degree earlier could be undone by some of these aftershocks.
There's no doubt about it. I just left the Santa Monica Freeway, which you saw the collapsed freeway section. I'll bet that came down another couple of feet as a result of this one. Structures themselves are going to be shaken, and they'll fall as a result of these aftershocks. Very dangerous time.
Let's go back now to the White House and Dee Dee Myers, who continues her briefing.
Again, I think has directed federal officials to work very closely with state and local officials to provide whatever assistance the federal government can.
Is any doing?
The first thing I think is to assess the damage, and the second thing is to provide whatever assistance state and local officials request and is possible to put forward.
How long do you expect them to stay out there?
As long as it takes.
How much money do you think will be required initially to get the federal government's response going?
I don't have any initial assessments yet. I think that will, Christine says that we expect something, an initial assessment later today. I think it may take some time before we can have an accurate assessment of the damage.
But is money available already in terms of not going back to Congress and requiring additional appropriations?
Yes.
How much money is available?
It's unclear. I think that there are a number of different ways that we can assess money or tap money that's already in the system. We've done it for other disasters this year. It's been a busy year for James Lee Witt and the folks over at FEMA between the floods and the fires and now the earthquake.
I'm happy that he was not notified. You spent those accounts down now, didn't you?
No, I think he was notified within a half an hour of the quake, and certainly the White House was notified immediately and began to take appropriate action.
He was notified by Cisneros. No.
Yeah, he was.
8 o'clock in the morning?
Correct. The earthquake struck around 7:30 Eastern time.
Dee Dee is an earthquake veteran, and you're looking at pictures. What's your take on it?
Well, I am something of an earthquake veteran, actually. It's hard to tell. It's a little unnerving to see your community suffering another quake like this, and it's been a tough couple of years for Los Angeles generally. I think the president's concerned about that, as are all of us. I'm certainly not an expert on earthquakes, but the biggest one I was ever in was, I think, 6.1 in 1971, which did a severe amount of damage. I think that there's great concern about the disruption in transportation due to collapsed freeways, about damage to homes and to other building and infrastructure, and we're just going to take a look at it and do whatever we can to help rebuild. Frank?
I remember the president saying that both the floods and the hurricanes have spent accounts down. He's actually borrowed from other accounts. Has there been any consultation with Congress about perhaps an emergency appropriation?
Glad you asked that. Actually, the White House has been in touch with all members of the California delegation who are affected by this, including Senators Feinstein and Boxer, and then members of Congress Tony Bielenson, Henry Waxman, Howard Berman, Jane Harmon, Julian Dixon, Lucille Roybal Allard, Javier Becerra, and the president will probably speak directly to some of them later today.
What about the leadership? Will it be necessary to get money?
The president hasn't spoken to anybody yet. We've been, I think, focusing more directly on people who are affected. Certainly we'll consult with members of Congress as the week goes on. Today is a federal holiday, and a lot of the members, of course, are still out in their districts. So certainly we'll do what we can to...
Channel. Southern California's San Fernando Valley shattered early this morning by a major earthquake, bringing death and chaos to the greater Los Angeles area. The quake and dozens of aftershocks have crushed buildings mangled highways, cut power and water supplies, and inflicted a human toll that is still rising.
This is a special edition of NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, reporting tonight from Southern California.
Good evening. Once again, the dream of a good life in Southern California has taken a major jolt. This area is still trying to recover tonight from a major earthquake that struck early this morning in the San Fernando Valley in Northridge, which is about 10 miles northwest of where I'm standing, and it did major damage throughout the Los Angeles basin. It was 6.6 on the Richter scale. 5 major highways have been cut, water supplies threatened, gas mains have exploded, a half-dozen communities have exploded in flames, and the death toll has been going up all day long. We begin tonight with a big picture from NBC's Larry Carroll.
The quake struck an area where more than 1 million people live. So far, at least 24 people are known dead. Hundreds have been injured. Early estimates of property damage are in excess of $500 million. The force of the quake shut down power grids, plunging thousands of households into darkness.
The ceiling fell down. My kitchen is totally destroyed.
Gas lines ruptured and fires raced out of control in heavily populated residential communities. 5 homes were consumed instantly when this gas main exploded, sending flames 100 feet into the air. The blast ruptured this water main, but dozens of others were shaken loose by the quake, sending torrents of water into valley streets. The smog mixed with smoke from more than 50 fires, and the extent of the damage began to hit home. Dead inside the rubble of the hillside home were 2 people, one of them this woman's daughter. The quake was centered 10 miles beneath the campus of Cal State Northridge, 25 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles. At least 1 fire was reported on campus, and 1 dormitory, home to several hundred students, collapsed. Most there were reported to have escaped unharmed. But students housed in this apartment building adjacent to the campus were not so safe. 12 people died when the 2nd and 3rd stories of the complex collapsed to ground level. Also hard hit, the freeway system that serves as many as 13 million people. 3 major freeways, all recently reinforced for earthquakes, were damaged and are closed to traffic. And then there's the property damage. Hundreds of homes and businesses are damaged, many beyond repair.
I mean, they don't have electricity, they don't have water, and they were just moving. And I'm just glad to be alive.
While not the most powerful on record in Southern California, the Northridge quake may well cause the most damage. Larry Carroll, NBC News, Los Angeles.
If there is a saving grace to this disaster, it is that this earthquake hit early this morning when many people were still at home, and it is, after all, a holiday. Nonetheless, a number of people are dead tonight, many more are injured, and many people, of course, have been severely dislocated from their homes. NBC's Roger O'Neill tonight on the fight for survival here.
That pile right there, the first pile you come to is where they're at.
It was a race against time all day long, a race to save lives.
I haven't heard anybody else.
Hello, is anybody there? This is all the first floor underneath here. This is the 2nd floor right here.
Is he underneath us?
Yeah. Is there anybody in there?
33 people heard the cries of rescuers at this apartment complex in the valley. But at least a dozen people were crushed to death as the 3-story building collapsed.
She's an old lady. It's just a foot sticking out on her sheet. Do you see it?
Yeah, she's gone.
For firemen, it was a day of heartbreak, but also triumph.
When you have somebody trapped in there, you just hope you can do the best to save them if they're alive.
Citizens responded to the cries of help, the cries of pain. Marco Pelias heard them after crawling out of his own apartment. He then helped pull 7 other people out of the rubble.
And the way they were screaming, you don't care about anything else, you just care about trying to get the people out of it.
At Granada Hills Community Hospital, the parking lot became a triage center. Several hospitals had to refuse the injured. Their buildings were too severely damaged.
But how did you get the cut with the piano?
What it's been like for you this morning?
Absolute hell.
Most of the injuries were not life-threatening, cuts and bruises, but still so many were in need of help, many had to wait their turn. This 2-week-old baby got immediate attention from nurse Jack Burns, who determined the bump on her head was not serious.
Nothing prepares for a day like today. Buildings falling down over here, people are all over the place, the parking lot's staked down. Nothing prepares for
few residents are prepared as they should be, food and water becomes precious commodities. Electricity means gas lines, and pay telephones become vital links to the outside world.
Just tell them Scylla's okay.
For the next several days, city parks will be home for thousands of people, not because their homes have been destroyed, but because this is perceived to be a safe place to be. There is still a lot of fear in L.A. tonight.
But for hundreds of others who were trapped, then rescued, tonight is a night to celebrate life.
Oh, that sky looks beautiful.
Roger O'Neill, NBC News, Los Angeles.
And I am joined now by California Governor Pete Wilson. And Governor, as we were just watching that report, we had another long aftershock here that lasted about 35 or 40 seconds. What can you tell us now about the extent of the damage throughout the Southern California from property loss alone?
Tom, we can't estimate what the property loss will be. It's premature to do that. Our concern right now is safeguarding human life and restoration of service. We are getting some good news. On the other hand, it is going to be probably a long night for a number of people. We will have the necessity, I think, even in areas where we expect to see a restoration of power, it may be a rather fragile structure, so we're urging everybody to have flashlights, candles. We're urging them to boil water. We've simply got to be prepared, and of course there has been damage, structural damage to the freeways. We have to assess how that can be repaired and what we can do by way of alternative routings.
Governor, you're beginning to preside over what is a permanent disaster area here in Southern California. With the fires and the riots and now this major earthquake, your economy is already in trouble. How do you begin to dig yourself out of this, given the economic dislocation that is bound to occur?
This obviously doesn't help. It will cost money. There will be disruption, particularly as it relates to some surface transportation, but already the California Highway Patrol is figuring out alternative routings for truck traffic and passenger traffic. Power will be restored. If not everyone, they will have it, I think, within a matter of, for most Angelenos, they will have, most of them will have power tonight. Some will be without water overnight. We'll get through it as we've gotten through the other problems, but it sure seems like we're getting more than our share.
Thank you very much, Governor Pete Wilson of California. And we'll tell you what the federal government is prepared to do when Nightly News continues in a moment.
There never seems to be enough of it. And the last thing you can afford to do is run out of it. Time. So rest assured, Delta Airlines will help you make the most of it. With over 4,900 flights a day to over 300 cities around the world. And best of all, we'll make sure you arrive relaxed and refreshed with plenty of time to spare. Delta Airlines.
Quick. What's the first thing that comes to mind when I say X-Lax? Wrong. You haven't been paying attention all these years. First of all, it's a pill. Hello? In fact, it's 3 different pills, so you can choose only as much as you need. Regular, maximum relief, and extra dental. Gee, all those years without X-Lax. No wonder you're so cranky.
Today's X-Lax, not what you expect.
Think about life in Southern California in recent years. They had the riots in the city, of course, and then those major fires just this past fall. And now this. The extent of the damage is still to be determined, but it is major indeed. There will be economic dislocation. And today, government officials at all levels, from the local all the way through the federal government, were already hard at work. We get the latest on that now from NBC's Robert Hager.
As FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration, opened a 24-hour-a-day war room to supervise Washington's response, FEMA Administrator James Lee Witt and Housing Secretary Cisneros left for Los Angeles to join Transportation Secretary Pena, already there. And President Clinton promised a swift federal response.
Due to the damage caused by the earthquake, I have, by signing the document that I will sign at the end of this statement, declared these areas of California to be a major disaster. Like all of you, I was able to watch it all unfold on television. It was really something.
Clinton then signed the documents, making formal plans already well underway. For now, FEMA's dispatching 4 federally funded search and rescue teams, 5 medical teams, emergency telephone communications equipment, emergency power generators, and firefighting equipment. Long range, it'll make up to $12,000 grants to low-income victims, arrange temporary housing or rental assistance for those who are homeless, and take applications for low-interest loans up to $200,000 for home repairs. But highway damage will be the major problem for a city where many millions commute by automobile each day. A big section of Interstate 10, the Santa Monica Freeway, has collapsed. Interstate 5, the Golden State Freeway, is closed by a collapse at the intersection with California 14. California 118, the San Fernando Valley Freeway, has been damaged, and others as well. To understand how difficult it is to replace whole sections of major freeways, it's instructive to look at what happened in the San Francisco earthquake 4 years ago. Near San Francisco in 1989, there was major damage to 3 vital commuting arteries. So far, only 1 has reopened. 4 years later, San Francisco is still not back to normal. Los Angeles may present even greater problems. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
To give you an idea of just how quixotic the damage from an earthquake can be, take a look at this building behind me. It's pretty much collapsed, and people did get out of there alive, but they've lost a lot inside. This is a street in the San Fernando Valley in a place called Studio City. It's called Moore Park. But then look at the rest of the street. It's all quite normal. You can see that the apartment buildings up and down the street survived. There are lots of stories of survival and heroism here in Southern California. Here are some of them tonight.
Make sure there's no nails. Right there, you can step on. Watch out for the nails. Everybody got them? So I grabbed my flashlight and we jumped up there and we got this guy out. And he wasn't hurt that bad, but we took him back across and some guys took him to the hospital on that section of the freeway.
And I had to go across the street and get an invalid that was totally dead weight. And he made my shoulders ache. And we got him in the car and got him out.
We had 3 houses burning on this side of Balboa and 2 on the other, and we were losing a house down here. We've been able to save that house with shake shingle roofs. All the houses downstream without the shake roofs are doing real well.
Keep going, keep going! Take the handful out.
So I have a very, very, very large armoire in the bedroom. Very large. It's about 7 foot high. Very big and very heavy. Next thing I knew, it landed on my head. And I'm waiting now for stitches.
We're fine. Everybody is fine. Don't worry about us. We're okay.
What's your name?
Okay, Buzz Carmen, Bill Carmen. The Carmens are okay in California. We're fine. Don't worry. We're okay.
Know that feeling? I called my mother in Southern California this morning at 5 a.m. her time. She picked up the phone and the first ring said, "I'm okay," without even wondering who might have been calling at that time. I'll be back with more on this earthquake later in the program, and we'll have the rest of the day's news in just a moment. Police are now said to be close to arresting Tonya Harding's ex-husband for the attack on Nancy Kerrigan. And more fierce winter weather has the Northeast on ice. The Midwest snowed under tonight.
When's the last time you had a bowl of Wheaties?
Wheaties. It's been a while.
I've never had Wheaties before. These are delicious. Crunchy.
I can taste the wheat. It's great. I like it. Let me have another bite. It's got more zip than cornflakes.
Actually, they're better than cornflakes.
We thank you for being with us, and have a good evening.
January 17th, 1994.
On a typical night, Los Angeles glistens. But tonight, great patches of L.A. without electricity sit in darkness after a disaster-filled day.
All of a sudden, our apartment started shaking.
The walls were cracking. There's no walls in our apartment any longer.
It just felt like about 100 elephants running through my bedroom.
I just can't believe we came out alive out of this.
Tonight, the disaster, the damage, the terror.
Oh, my goodness.
The latest on the California earthquake. This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
The noise is what unnerves some people the most. Describing the sound of the earthquake itself, people seem always to fall back on the old cliches. The roaring freight train coming right through your living room. But then there are the noises that follow in the wake of the earth ripping its crust apart. In the city, the quake is always followed by the howling of sirens, automobile alarms set off by the tremor, and the additional howling of dogs, and people screaming and babies crying, and the shattering of glass and chinaware and furniture tipping over. And when it happens, as it did last night in Los Angeles at 4:30 in the morning, well before dawn, your world is pitched into a darkness blacker than anything you'd imagined, because all the lights in the streets around you, every light you'd taken for granted, even though your own bedroom lights are out, are all extinguished at precisely the same moment. Even if you're not trapped under a collapsed building, that can be a very frightening experience indeed. Tonight, in Los Angeles, there are the consequences of the quake itself and the fear of the aftershocks yet to come. Here's Nightline correspondent Dave Marish.
Ted, 27 people are now known to have died in the 16 hours or so since that earthquake struck. Many of them were killed instantly, crushed by falling roofs and ceilings and highway overpasses. The suddenness of these events has shocked this community, leaving many people tonight silent, stunned, passively waiting for tomorrow's light. The shock, though, does seem to have short-circuited some bad impulses, too. At least so far, there are few reports of looting or other malicious attempts to take advantage of the confusion caused by the most damaging earthquake to hit this area in more than 2 decades. At this hour in the greater Los Angeles area, the first concern is for more than 100 fires still burning, some of them out of control. Harried firefighters on the ground, sometimes aided by water-dropping helicopters in the sky, often just rush from fire to fire. Not far from this fire in Granada Hills, dozens of homeless refugees are camped out in the parking lot of the Granada Hills Hospital. These are people who've been treated for minor injuries and released. But released to where? To what? Questions about their uncertain futures they can only sit in borrowed lawn chairs and ponder tonight. The latest count shows more than 1,000 buildings, many of them residential, were damaged today. How many of them can and will be repaired is yet another difficult question for tomorrow. As this chaotic day was ending, we were able to take advantage of the last hour and a half of daylight to take a helicopter tour of some of the worst-hit parts of the San Fernando Valley, where this temblor had its epicenter.
Flying into Southern California, as we did just hours ago, the first sure sign of crisis was what we didn't see. No traffic here in the capital of car culture. Down below us is Interstate 5, the Golden State Freeway, the major north-south artery in the state of California. Absolutely empty, dead, shut. And there, a perfect single image of tragedy averted. Look where that semi-driver was able to bring his tractor-trailer to a halt. He's got about a 4-foot cushion between himself and a 30-foot drop to disaster. That holiday bow of concrete ribbon is what California is famous for. This is the main interchange between I-14 below, I-5 coming up. You can see it's collapsed. This same knot fell down 23 years ago during an earthquake. It was rebuilt specifically to withstand the shock of California's temblors. Its failure to do so this time will undoubtedly produce both recrimination and investigation in the days to come. It's a measure of how frightened people are as the aftershocks continue to rock across this area of the San Fernando Valley, how few have turned out to gawk at the damage. Almost everybody here is staying home and trying to save what they can. Not just highways through Southern California were damaged by this quake. Look down there at that rail line running through the middle of the San Fernando Valley. The rails were twisted. A train derailed from it at the height of the quake. Tank cars filled with toxic chemicals were among those derailed. The area had to be evacuated. The devastation of California's freeway system will undoubtedly inconvenience the most people. But by far, the most damage done in this quake was done down there at that apartment complex near the campus of California State University at Northridge. At least a dozen lives were lost in those buildings, which are used mostly by students as housing during the academic year. Many were caught in their beds asleep as last night's events unfolded. A search for victims was also pressed here at this enormous shopping mall in Northridge. Several major buildings were damaged, several parking garages utterly destroyed, pointing out the good fortune that this earthquake took place at 4:30 in the morning when almost no one was out on the streets, and certainly no one was at the mall shopping.
Cameraman Larry Mitchell, who shot those pictures with me, told me of the wreckage of his own apartment in Studio City, which is on the other side of the Hollywood Hills from the San Fernando Valley. I can't imagine, he said, what I'm going to find when I get home. And then with a grim second thought that is very widely shared here in the Los Angeles area tonight, he added, yes, I can, picturing a floor of scattered books and shattered lamps and dishes. Ted?
Dave Marish, thanks very much. Joining us now live from Los Angeles City Hall is the new mayor of Los Angeles, Richard Riordan. Mr. Mayor, you've put in a dusk-to-dawn curfew. Is that because of anything that's happened or simply because you fear something might?
It's because we fear something might happen. It's strictly precautionary. We've told the police to use common sense because there are a lot of people who are afraid to go back in their houses and are camping out in parks and public buildings, but we want to stop the first bit of looting that might happen and, in effect, tell people if they try to loot or do anything like that, they're going to be caught right away.
Take us through some of the infrastructure problems that you're going to be facing over the next few days. I mean, they're really enormous, from the highways to the water to the electricity. What's the worst, and how long will it take to solve all of them?
Well, I met starting at 5:15 this morning down in the Emergency Operations Center with the heads of the various departments of the city. The first main things are water and power. It's the first time in the history of LA that all of the power went off in the city at one time. We've restored over 60% of the power, and we think we'll have probably over 90% of it by sometime tomorrow morning. There are some parts of the valley that may be without power for several days. And on water, we have somewhat the same problem. Our filtration systems were shut down, and so the secondary chloration of the water wasn't done in some parts of the valley. What I mean by that, the water was chlorinated when in the reservoirs, and it's usually chlorinated coming out, but we weren't able to do that because the filtration systems were down. We also suspect that some small part of the valley will be without chlorinated or secondarily chlorinated water for several days.
There's one aspect of my question that you haven't addressed yet, and that's the highway communications. You got a lot of highways down, a lot of overpasses down. That's probably going to cause a commuter nightmare.
We've had a variety of meetings all day between our Department of Transportation, the police, the state Caltrans system, the County Metropolitan Transit Authority, to come up with creative ways to keep traffic flowing as well as possible tomorrow, such as making sure that tonight that alternative routes are clearly delineated, to try to get businesses to stagger when they open, when they close, to also, in the case of Caltrans, to get them working right away, which they have in hiring architects, engineers, to restore the damaged structures.
This is your city now, and just from a human point of view, how do you think the folks have held up so far?
I'm very proud of the city. I'm very proud of the leadership of the city, the heads of the various departments of the city, from Chief Williams of the police department, Chief Manning of the fire department, and other heads have been working since dawn today. The citizens of this city have been cool. They've thought about their neighbors, and I'm really proud of our city, and I'm proud to be their mayor.
Well, Mayor Reardon, the best of luck to you and all the other officials who have this huge task ahead of them. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
When we come back, we'll be joined by one of the heroes of today's earthquake. But first, Chris Bury will take us through the day that Los Angeles will never forget.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by MCI.
Quick and Rally is one of the...
Los Angeles is hardly a city without experience in disasters. In just the past couple of years, they've had riots, fires, and droughts, which have plagued the county. But this earthquake was a special kind of terror. It was one which was felt by all of the residents of L.A., all at the same time, at 4:30 this morning. Chris Bury starts there and takes us through their day.
We have word from Southern California that there's been an earthquake, a strong earthquake. We don't know the extent of damage yet, but some parts of Los Angeles have been blacked out.
The first sketchy reports on the morning shows could not anticipate the magnitude of a disaster that might have been much worse. At 4:31 this morning, California time, when the first violent shocks moved the earth from a point just north of Los Angeles, most people were home in bed.
It picked me up, threw me into the TV set, and then I was out for maybe 10, 15 seconds.
And the fire just came in the windows. And the front of the house started burning immediately.
It was bad. It was bad. We just got out with our clothes on our back. Evacuate the area.
The earthquake had set off a domino chain of related disasters.
What we're looking at, of course, is a large volume of water that is coming out just on the south side of this old Van Norman reservoir. And as we watch this water, it's going down into the residential area along the 405 towards the 118.
Now we have to deal first with earthquake, then fire and collapse, and now we have a flood on our hands.
Within the city of Los Angeles, we're experiencing widespread power outages. It seems that virtually all power throughout the city is out.
By early morning, even more problems became apparent. Freeway ramps had buckled and cleaved, though fortunately the roads themselves were deserted this holiday morning. By 8 o'clock, the first incomplete casualty counts were dribbling in.
We now have 2 fatalities confirmed, and I don't know details of either.
By now, it was clear the communities of Northridge and Sylmar, just north of L.A., had been hardest hit. Near Northridge, 64 cars of a freight train were tossed from the tracks like toys.
At one point, the tracks actually have sort of bobby-pinned. They've pinched together, and then they're wide again and pinched together, and when you imagine the kind of force that it takes to bend steel that way, it's very sobering.
By 9 o'clock this morning, at least 20 mild to moderate aftershocks had further jangled nerves. And by now, dozens of individual dramas were playing out. The most serious, the collapse of a 3-story apartment building in Northridge.
Just a huge blast. You know, I awakened to like a TV to my jaw, and I got thrown out of bed, and I'm along the first floor here, and I just can't explain. I'm just lucky to be alive.
We've been doing this now nonstop since the quake happened, and yet we have not been able to even grasp the magnitude of the amount of damage and the amount of suffering now that's happening here in Los Angeles.
The damage is now so widespread, both the mayor of Los Angeles and governor of California declared states of emergency. In Washington, where a winter storm delayed relief officials headed to Los Angeles, President Clinton interrupted a ceremony at the White House to promise federal help.
We intend to do everything we possibly can to help the people of Los Angeles and Southern California deal with the earthquake and its aftermath.
All day long, the casualty count kept climbing.
We do have an update on the death toll. It is now 12.
This hospital parking lot was filled with the walking wounded. They must wait while the seriously hurt are treated first. A call goes out for more doctors and nurses.
We don't have the capacity to take seriously ill patients. Other hospitals shouldn't evacuate their patients and bring them here.
10:15. In Northridge, another drama unfolds. Rescuers race the clock to free a maintenance man buried under a collapsed parking garage.
One of the employees who was driving a sweeper to clean the road surface of the parking structure was underneath when the quake hit. The thing just pancaked below, 3 levels down, and he was trapped in the machine, and firemen have been working for some time trying to get him out.
Early afternoon, and worried L.A. residents are rushing to gas stations and grocery stores. This one giving away meat is swarmed. Reports of looting are heard throughout the day. Meanwhile, the news from Northridge, where that apartment building has collapsed, is grim.
It's looking worse by the minute here. The death toll now is up to 14 confirmed dead.
Personally, I haven't seen a building collapse like this. What's happened here is obviously the second and third floor has actually pancaked the first floor and actually in some portions of the building brought it down to ground level.
A few miles away, the other mini-drama of the man trapped in a parking garage seems headed for a happier ending.
And he has been down there since 4:31 this morning. One of his co-workers said that after the quake, they heard him screaming from the position of being trapped.
Here they go.
There he is. He's up. He's on the gurney. A whole host of firefighters taking him around.
He was pinned down with a main beam of the structure over his legs. The whole front of the cab was completely crushed down on top of his legs.
The injured worker is airlifted to a local hospital.
A substantial aftershock to this morning's earthquake has just rumbled through Southern California.
All afternoon, the aftershocks kept coming, hundreds of them. Indeed, this aftershock, measuring 5.5 on the Richter scale, picked up dust across the San Fernando Valley. By late today, earthquake victims throughout the valley were adding up their personal losses. Others set up camp for the night.
Everything is broken. There's structural damage, and we're sleeping outside till we can get a handle on it.
You can't move in there to face it. I mean, there's no place you can step without broken glass or the piano tipped over, or the TV's tipped over. Just about everything's lost inside.
This evening, as dusk fell, the mayor of Los Angeles ordered a curfew.
No person shall be on public property, including public streets and sidewalks, or on any vacant private property during the period from sunset until sunrise of the next day.
Tonight, power had come back on in much of Los Angeles, though parts of the San Fernando Valley are still dark. Thousands have no electricity, heat, or telephones. Only some small comfort in the knowledge it could have been worse. This is Chris Bury for Nightline.
And now we're going to show you a live shot from our KABC camera in Los Angeles. Let's take a look at the parking lot or the parking area of Reseda High School, which has been turned into, as you can see, a massive evacuation center. I don't know if the camera will show you this, but not too far away, just about 100 yards beyond the camera there, are the high school's tennis courts. They, too, have been turned into part of the evacuation center. But here are just a few of the people who have been put out of their homes and who are spending the night in that parking lot. Natural disasters can bring out the worst and the best in humankind. Today's events were no different. Joining us now from our bureau in Los Angeles, Mike Kubasi. He was a resident of the now-collapsed Northridge Meadows apartment. He is one of the day's heroes, although I was just looking at some notes that a colleague of mine made, Mike, when he was talking to you before, and he said that you said you've been talking all day long because you're afraid to stop talking. Can you tell me what that's about?
Yeah, actually, this is the first time I've sat down since 4:30 this morning, and I'm really shaking, so please bear with me. I think if I just was to sit and calm, I'd probably lose it. So much has happened, and I've seen so much today. It's devastating. This is the first time I've sat down. So many things. The devastation was just horrifying. It was horrifying, and it's wonderful to see how under the circumstances, how everyone just pulled through together.
Now, the reason I described you as a hero in the introduction is that you were responsible for pulling at least 8 people out of that apartment building that pancaked in on itself. You are one of the residents, were one of the residents of that apartment building. Why don't you just tell us what happened, I mean, when you woke up at 4:30 and what transpired right after that?
Well, at 4:30 this morning, the place just started shaking, and normally I wouldn't have thought nothing of it, just another earthquake in Southern California, but this was horrifying. The sound was like thunder, the shearing of the wood, and it just didn't stop. I cried out to God. I was terrified, and then it was dark, and I reached for my flashlight. I couldn't find it. There was no light, all the power, everything was off, and it was scary. I couldn't find anything. Finally, when the shaking stopped, I got some light and worked my way through my apartment and tried to open my front door, and I couldn't do it. I heard one of my neighbors, James, yell to me, "Are you okay?" I replied, "Yes, I was, but can you kick the door open? I'm stuck." He says, "You got to get out and help Norm, elderly man across from our apartment." I said, "Well, I can't get out." He says, "Well, just move your closet door." The wall sheared wide open. I did so, and sure enough, the wall was literally torn apart. I climbed through it by the water heater and through the nails, and that put me out on the 3rd floor hallway, and we proceeded then to get gentleman Norm out of his building on the 3rd floor with some ropes and earthquake chain ladder. He was scared. He was terrified. We had to literally look in his eyes and yell at him, and he didn't have an option. We told him, "You have to get out." You know, he had to straddle the windowsill, and we put his feet in each step of the ladder on the way down. Once he was down, there was gas. We smelled gas from the gas barbecues. We were yelling at the people to turn the gas off, and then I proceeded to my neighbors, yelled into their complex, and I heard the woman's voice, Shannon. She was already in the courtyard, and I knew she was okay. I moved down the hall with some more, pounded on a neighbor's door. They pounded back. I said, "You know, let's get you out." He said, "We can't, door's stuck." Ran, got a hammer, busted down their door, pulled the 2 of them out. Acknowledged an older man, about 92, his name's Leo. "You know, we're going to get you out, calm down, you know, we're here, we'll be with you as soon as we can." Proceeded and climbed down from the 3rd floor down to the 2nd floor, checked everybody there, and just continued just pulling people out as we could, me and James. It was frightening, but we couldn't show the people we were scared. It was dark. We had to just yell at him and say, "Look, you haven't got an option. You have to come over the balcony. You have to crawl through the windowsill." At one point, to the landlord, I actually climbed halfway up the ladder. I said, "Look, I'm 200 pounds. This ladder isn't going anywhere. It's secure. Come down." She finally did, and we brought her down to safety with her husband. It was phenomenal. And then when the sunlight came out, we finally shuttled some of the elder people outside the complex, and that's when it really dawned on me that there was no more 1st floor. It was gone. The people who were living there, they never knew what hit them, and there's nothing we can do. The firemen, once the sun came out, we started to see some firemen, but basically in the courtyard that we had, the 2nd and 3rd floor was secure with everyone just coming together. It was devastating. It was shocking, and I went back into my apartment, and I just thank God that I'm here, because I could see the sky. My ceiling was blown apart. My floor, I was able to look down at the 2nd floor living room from below me, and just the way that I got out of there surprises me. I thank God that I'm here to able to talk to you tonight.
Mike, take a deep breath and hang on. We're gonna come back to you. And let me warn our affiliates that we're going to go over tonight a little beyond our allotted time for, among other reasons, the opportunity to listen to someone like Mike Cabessa, an extraordinary story. Tonight, we will listen when we come back to him to the rest of his story. We'll be back in a moment.
Seems to be enough of it. And the last thing you can afford to do is run out of it. Time. So rest assured,
I asked Mike Kurbasi just to hang in for another question or two. There's one question in particular, Mike, that I wanted to ask you, and I ask it of you because not everyone would have done what you did. Not everyone would have risked their lives the way you did. Why did you?
I would hope that if I was in someone else's situation, someone would do it for me. I went back afterwards and looked in my apartment, and just the fact that I got out of there, thank God. God's grace got me out, and I didn't even think of it. They needed my help. Their faces, Leo's face on the 3rd floor by himself, a 2-year-old man, helpless. What are you going to say? I mean, people say the puppy dog look. This old man needed help. Norm needed help. There was Patricia, a neighbor friend of mine, she's 32. She needed help. What were they going to do? Someone had to do something, and fortunately, again, some of the guys in the complex, we were calm, and we just did what we had to do at the time we had to do it. And like I said, tonight, when I'm lying in bed, I'm going to lose it. I know it's hurting right now.
There's something, I mean, that was an apartment complex in which you had a lot of old people and a lot of young people, a lot of university students there,
yes,
too,
sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
Why? Because it's inexpensive?
No, sir, it's right across the street from the University of Northridge, and it's a wonderful complex. It's a secure complex. It's clean. It's well-maintained. It's quiet. About 30% are senior citizens. I'd say about another 30% were students, and then the rest of us we're just trying to make it. Wonderful complex. It's truly a loss from Northridge.
And you all seem to know each other. I mean, you refer to each of these people by name.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. By the pool in the summer, in the laundry room, helping each other during, carrying groceries in. Many times I know I've helped some of the ladies in there help carry their groceries, and just helping each other. Barbecuing downstairs during the summer, you'd see each other. Everybody knew everybody, and everyone watched out for everyone.
Well, you certainly more than watched out for people today, Mike. It's a pleasure to meet you and a privilege. And in behalf of all those people that you helped, let me say thank you. You're a good man.
Thank you, sir.
While the worst is probably over in terms of damage done by the earthquake, its impact is still being felt as many L.A. neighborhoods spend the night in darkness without power. ABC's Aaron Brown visits just such a neighborhood in his report.
It looked for all the world like a typical Southern California night. At the intersection.
We've all seen today on our own televisions the buildings that have collapsed, the freeways turned into rubble, the power has been cut off, that gas mains have exploded, and most tragically, many people have been injured and several lives have already been lost. Due to the damage caused by the earthquake, I have, by signing the document that I will sign at the end of this statement, declared these areas of California to be a major disaster, thereby authorizing the expenditures of funds necessary for federal disaster assistance, as requested by Governor Wilson. This program will include, among other things, low-interest loans to replace homes and businesses, cash grants where needed, housing assistance, emergency unemployment assistance, and funds to rebuild the highways, the schools, and other infrastructure. At my direction, the director of FEMA, James Lee Witt, is now on his way to California, along with Secretary of Transportation Pena and Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Cisneros. In addition, I have directed some senior White House staff to the scene as well. Our hearts and prayers go out to the people of Southern California. I spoke early this morning with Mayor Reardon and then with Governor Wilson, and wished them well and pledged to them that the United States government would do all that we possibly can to be helpful. They were obviously appreciative, and we're glad that James Lee Witt, as well as our cabinet secretaries, were on their way to the scene. The people of Southern California have been through a lot recently with the fires. The economy of the state of California has suffered enormous stresses in the last few years, and I think all of us should be very sensitive to what they are going through now. I know the rest of America will offer them their thoughts and their prayers tonight, and will support our common efforts to help them to recover from this tragedy and to get on with the business of rebuilding their lives. The assistance here will be short-term to help people get through the next few days, but there will also be long-term work to be done, and we expect to be involved as full partners in that. Again, let me say, I wish the mayor, the governor, the people of California well. We're looking forward to working with them. I've had the opportunity to speak with both Senator Boxer and Senator Feinstein today, and I'm confident that everybody's doing everything they can. I'm going to be here basically waiting for reports today and tomorrow as we assess what our next steps should be. Let me sign the document for disaster declaration, and then I will answer a few questions. Yes, Will.
When you say that this will be short-term assistance, any idea how much money this is going to cost the federal government in the short term as well as in the long term? Will you be going back to Congress seeking emergency assistance?
I don't know. We've got to wait until we get some sense of how much money is involved. The most expensive thing I know about now would obviously be the 3 freeways. And any of you who have ever, and I guess all of you, certainly with me and probably on your own, have been on those freeways in times of difficult traffic, know that how pivotal that's going to be to restoring the economic capacity of the people of Southern California. They depend heavily on those freeways, and with that many, with 3 of them severely damaged, I would imagine that would be the most urgent and most expensive need that we know about now. Now, of course, there may be other things, and I have to get a report. Again, I expect to be getting reports on this all through tomorrow.
Mr. President, are you considering going out there yourself?
Yes, you know, I went to the flooded areas in the Middle West, and I went, I basically like to take a first-hand view of these things, but I don't want to be in the way. When I go, I want to be a constructive presence. And we've got Mr. Witt out there. We've got Secretary Cisneros and Secretary Pena out there. We've got people from my staff out there. I think it's important that I not go out there and get in the way. So I don't know when it would be appropriate for me to go. I'm going to wait till I get some feedback from the folks on the ground there. They've got enough of a traffic jam with those 3 interstates messed up as it is.
Mr. President, what went through your mind this morning when you first were told about this earthquake? We understand you called your brother right away.
Well, the first thing, I guess I was a citizen first. First thing I did was pick up the phone and call my brother because I knew that he lived very close to the epicenter of the earthquake. And I called him probably at 5:15 their time, so it was maybe 35 minutes or 40 minutes after the earthquake had occurred. He was fine. He said they'd suffered some, you know, there's some significant disruption in movement there in his apartment, but they didn't have any significant loss. So I felt good about that. And then I went to try to get another report, and then I started calling folks in California in a more official capacity. But of course, like all of you, I was able to watch it all unfold on television. It was really something.
Mr. President, do you anticipate a need to activate federal troops to, come to the aid of rescue?
If we need to do it, we can. We're organized to do it. But again, I want to wait until I get a report back from Mr. Witt after he talks to the mayor and the governor and others involved out there. We've had a pretty good record of, we've had experience working with the folks in that area. Ironically, we've got some sites that were made available for emergency aid during the fires that could still be activated rather quickly. I mean, our folks are in place there, and the contingencies that they need to think through, I think have pretty well been thought through. So we should be able to give you a much better report tomorrow sometime. Thank you.
President Clinton having his remarks from the Oval Office, and as you saw there, at 5:08 Eastern Time, 3:08 Pacific Time, the President signed the emergency declaration that will free up some short-term funds for efforts underway here to clean up the rubble and assess the damage and make some things available to people who so badly need them, principally authorizing funds for low-interest loans, cash grants, and that sort of thing. Our coverage of the earthquake in Southern California this day in January 1994 will continue.
$50, 725, 50, RB 97, 50. Sold them. Hello, I'm Mark Thomas. We're conducting an auction Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, January 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. We're selling assets on behalf of the RTC, banks, leasing companies, manufacturers, and others, including traditional desks, credenzas, conference tables, leather executive chairs and sofas, 486 computers, fax machines and copiers, residential furniture, including 18th century dining room and bedroom suites, grandfather clocks and curios, also jewelry and rugs, automobiles such as Mercedes and Jaguar. Call 682-0475 or see today's Chronicle.
When severe weather threatens, turn to the Weather Channel for all the latest weather conditions and safety information in your area. We'll keep you posted with the latest radar, watches and warnings, continuous updates, and safety tips. Remember, your best bet in severe weather is to stay informed. So when the weather takes a turn for the worse, turn to the Weather Channel.
Seen any good music lately? Cable brings you more concerts, more videos, more music than any other source. From rock to rap, from...
Of the fact that these aftershocks continue to rumble, they don't want to get him too close to any compromised sections of the roadway, and there are many of those. Many commuters stayed off the region's crippled highway system today. Rush hour was still a huge mess. Dirt slides caused 2 lanes of one busy freeway to be closed. It took some drivers up to 3 to 4 hours to get into work. As one commuter put it, they need some restrooms on these freeways. Traffic problems are just one part of this story. The quake's toll in human terms now stands at 43 people confirmed dead, 2,600 people treated at hospitals. According to one report, more than 500 people were injured seriously enough to be admitted to hospitals for one period of time or another. Our coverage from Los Angeles and the president's visit here will continue throughout the day. For now, I'm Frank Sesno here in L.A. We go back to Natalie and Bobby in Atlanta.
Frank, thanks, and that's Newsday. I'm Natalie Ellen.
And I'm Bobby Batusi. The International Hour is next now with Jim Clancy. Here's a preview.
Thanks, Bobby and Natalie. Coming up on the International Hour, shaken to the core, Los Angeles counts the cost of Monday's earthquake in lives and money. And scattered to the winds, refugees from Afghanistan.
Clinton is now touring the disaster site, a disaster that may run from $15 to $30 billion, according to the state's governor, to repair. Angelenos tried to go back to work today, hitting the freeways here, but it was a long, long haul for many of them. President Clinton arrived in Southern California about an hour and a half ago with millions in emergency aid ready and presumably hundreds of millions, perhaps billions more somewhere down the line. What you see here is a picture courtesy of our affiliate here in Los Angeles, KTLA. Somewhere along the route, the president has stopped, presumably, and is out taking a look at some more of the damage, mingling with residents, presumably, or other workers. He was scheduled to go to a residential area to take a bit of a walk and see some of the residential areas that have been damaged, talk with some of the residents in an area called Granada Hills. Budget Director Leon Panetta, who is on the trip with the president, says $45 million is being made available immediately for highway repairs and debris removal. Another $239 million is being made available in small business loans. That will be freed up. But the White House press secretary, Dee Dee Myers, says the president will not have a better idea of how many billions potentially may be needed from the federal government until later on in the month. He may have something to say January 25th in the State of the Union message. The president will also be sitting down with residents in the area and hearing from them in a roundtable discussion later on. Elsewhere in Los Angeles, as we mentioned, traffic has become an even greater monster to maneuver than usual, no thanks to closure of long stretches of highways this morning. CNN correspondent Ann McDermott, who has been taking a look and surveying this situation right from the beginning, is at a section of the Santa Monica Freeway, and this was no easy morning to commute to work for those who tried.
No, it wasn't, Frank, but actually they are really making rather remarkable progress here. The demolition crews who are tearing down this portion of the Santa Monica Freeway, an over-ramp at Fairfax Avenue. They expect, in fact, to have most of the concrete chunks down by about 3 p.m. local time, that's Pacific time, if only, of course, that they could put its replacement in as quickly.
Very often in the last 2 years, I have come here when things were difficult for people, and I always walk away utterly astonished. I would like to say 2 things by way of introduction. First, on behalf of all the people on our federal team, we want to thank the mayor and the members of the city council and city government, the governor and the state legislators, Senator Boxer, Senator Feinstein, the members of the United States Congress, the members of the county government, the people I have already met with here today. The sense of teamwork here has been truly extraordinary. And I appreciate all of you doing that so much. When I became president, one of the things I most wanted to do was to give the American people a high level of confidence that their government at least would work in basic ways, and that they could trust us at least to do the basic human things right without regard to party, philosophy, whatever fights we were having over economic policy or anything else in the world, that when the chips were down, the basic things that people were entitled to have done by their national government, they would feel that. And I suppose there's no more important area than in an emergency for people to have that kind of feeling. Today, the second thing I want to say is I never cease to be amazed by the energy and the optimism, the courage and the constant good humor of so many millions of people in this state against all odds. And I walked the crowds today. Through these crowds, I saw public workers that haven't slept more than 2 or 3 hours in 3 days, working on the roads, the water lines, the gas lines. We saw countless numbers of people who had lost their homes, who didn't know when they were going to be able to go back to work. We saw children asking us to help get their schools fixed so they could go back to school. I met a man who had saved 3 homes in his neighborhood, along with a team of firemen. I met a woman who had lost her home. This is unbelievable, lost her home, who said to me, you know, I lost my home, and I'm really grateful you folks are coming here to help, but when you go to that meeting this afternoon, I hope you'll just ask everybody to do the right thing. She said, ask people not to overcharge us for water, but ask all the people who are hurt not to take advantage of FEMA. She said, you know, somebody in the rest of this country might get in trouble later this year, and I lost my home, but we're going to have to do some of this ourselves. And I heard some people talking about asking for reimbursement for things that were already broken in their homes. And she said, we just all ought to do the right thing, and we'll come out okay. And so I say to all of you who are elected, you got a lot to be proud of just in the people that you represent. The mayor has already mentioned all the people in the federal team who came out here, but I would like to thank them. Our FEMA director, James Lee Witt, and Secretary Cisneros, Secretary Pena, the Federal Highway Administrator, Rodney Slater, the Deputy Secretary of Commerce, David Barham, John Emerson from my staff came out here early. All told, we've had about 1,500 federal personnel in California, Washington, and at the Teleregistration Center in Denton, Texas, working on this. And as I said, it's really been a joy to work with the local and the state officials. I think we're all about to get the hang of working with each other, but we hope we don't have another chance to do it very soon. As you know, I was asked to declare a disaster declaration on the day that the earthquake occurred, and I did that. And we'll be talking later in this meeting about the whole range of federal services that are available, and about the disaster assistance centers that FEMA will set up and how people can access them. I ask all of you who are federal officials and state officials and county officials and local officials to help us with this. I looked at those people today, and a lot of those folks are not used to fooling with the government for anything. They're not used to asking for help. They can't be charged with the knowledge of what is in a FEMA program or an SBA program or some other agency program. We're going to do our very best to make it easy and accessible for them, and they'll talk more about that in a minute. But you can help us a lot, Mayor. All of you can help us a lot by simply telling us if it's reaching people. Now, when this is all over, Leon Panetta and I have to go back to Washington and figure out how to pay for it, and that's our job. But it won't work unless it actually works. And I mean, when I was walking up and down those lines today, looking at those folks, I thought most of these people are just good, hard-working people trying to do the right thing. and it never occurred to them that they would ever have to figure out how to work their way through a maze of any sort of federal program, whatever. So one of the things that all of you can do to help us is to be good intermediaries, and if it's not working, let us know. If we need to be someplace we're not, let us know. And that's, I think, very, very important. The other point I want to make is that we'll be talking a lot about emergency aid today, but we recognize that it's going to take a good while to finish this work. When I was out at the place where the highway broke down, one of many, I asked how long it would take to fix it. And the highway engineer said, oh, probably about a year. And I said, well, what do we have to do to fix it in less time? And it's not just a question of money, it's also a question of organization. We'll talk more about that today. I want to make three specific announcements today, but to make this point. This is a national problem. We have a national responsibility, and we will be in it for the long run. This is not something where all of us from the federal government just showed up while this is an issue in the headlines, gripping the hearts and emotions of all your countrymen and women who feel for you all the way to the tip of northern Maine and the tip of southern Florida. This is something we intend to stay with until the job is over. And in that connection, I have been authorized to say that today the Small Business Administration will be releasing enough money to support about $240 million in new low-interest loans to people who qualify for them. That we will release $45 million in new funds from the Department of Transportation to support the beginning of all the cleanup and the beginning of the repair movement. You know, there's unfortunately, a lot of destruction now that has to be done on those roads before the construction can start. So that will accelerate that process. And the third thing I want to say is that as soon as we get good cost estimates, and the governor and the mayor have given us some today, but as soon as we get good cost estimates on what the losses are and what kinds of things fall within the responsibility of the federal government, we will then see how much money we now have already appropriated for disasters. And then, along with your congressional delegation, I expect to ask the Congress for an emergency supplemental appropriation for California as soon as the Congress returns on January the 25th. And I believe the Congress will do the right thing. And I want to tell you that this is something I think the California delegation will be absolutely united on, and we've already had conversations with them. I'm grateful that so many members of the delegation are here today. Let me just say one final thing. I have been asked also by several people, by the mayor, the governor, and the senators, among others today, about the matching requirement. Generally, in any emergency, there's a 25% match requirement, which the federal government can be waived so that the match requirement goes down to 10% for state and local contribution to disaster assistance. I wish I could just come here today and tell you that I can waive that. We waived it in the Midwest flood. You know, when we had the floods earlier this year, we had a 500-year flood, the worst flood, but we hope it only comes along once every 500 years. I think you have a very strong case for waiver, but before we can approve it under the law, we have to have a realistic assessment of what the costs are, because the criteria established by Congress for waiver is that the burdens on the state and local resources will be too great to reasonably bear, given the other problems. Now, if you look at the economic problems that California and Southern California have had alone in the last 4 years, I don't think it will be too difficult for you to make that case, but it is not legally possible for me to say until I see the numbers and the arguments. So you have to make the case. We will work with you to help you make that case, but that's a commitment I can't make today until we see the evidence under the law. We will proceed with the emergency supplemental, and I'd like to spend the rest of the meeting just sort of listening to what's going on, what the problems are, because when I leave here today, I want to have a clear sense that we have our act together, and that when we go back to Washington, we'll be able to do our part there while you're doing your part here. And the last point I want to make again is that we have no intention, none, of letting this be a short-term thing. We will stay with you until this job is finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll now call on Governor Pete Wilson to make some remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. President Clinton beginning his roundtable discussion here in Los Angeles. We will resume our coverage of the President's meeting with Angelenos and federal and state officials after a brief break. We'll be right back.
I hate my wimpy toilet bowl cleaner.
Introducing new X14 toilet bowl cleaner with two...
ABC News continuous coverage of the earthquake will be with you throughout the afternoon. Tom Brokaw is en route to Los Angeles. Nightly news will come to you from Los Angeles tonight, and our primetime coverage will continue to follow the effects of Earthquake 94. For now, we'll take a short break and be back after this message.
Well, the first time I tried it, it was like, whoa.
And you're seeing signs of this basically all along this stretch of Balboa. How far it extends, I'm not sure, but they have basically curtailed traffic going through here and are not allowing anyone to drive through. Residents are, as you can see, staying outside, watching from the fronts of their houses. It does smell very strongly of gas right now, and Carlos, as you mentioned, they have turned off the gas, but they're allowing the residual gas to burn out from that fire that you can see down on the other end. And that's basically all they can do. They can just stand there and watch it. They've done all they can do, and they expect it'll burn out sometime in the next couple of hours. They're just not sure how much gas is left in that main gas line.
Michelle, is it safe to assume that right there they're without water and power?
Yes, they are definitely without power. I do not know that they're without water.
I know we are, and it's kind of frustrating to watch that water pouring out of there. There's been no water here since the quake.
In fact, let me just ask this resident right here about whether or not he's got water. Excuse me, sir, do you have water in your house right now? You do have water service?
No, there's no water service. We've got bottled water.
You have no water and no power?
No power, no water, no electricity. We've got telephones.
Oh, your telephones are working now. You're able to call out and receive calls in?
And receive calls.
But
that's it.
So how did your house fare through the earthquake?
We've got some structural damage here in the corner of the baby's room. Other than that, we seem to be fine. The whole inside of the house is destroyed, but that's just stuff.
Things that have fallen over and...
Yeah, every dish in the house was broken. China cabinet came down. All of that stuff's gone. But it's all replaceable.
So have you talked with your neighbors at all and found out how they're doing?
Yeah, they're doing okay over here, and the neighbors over here were out of town. So we just went over and shut their gas lines off, and they won't believe it when they walk in. Their house is a mess.
Yeah. Thanks for talking with us.
When we come back, we'll take another look at how this day started at 4:31 a.m. Pacific time.
If you suffer from sinus pain and pressure, take Dristan Sinus. It contains...
And we'll also send you our exciting Private Pleasures video, absolutely free.
Not available anywhere else. Collect this exclusive video of your favorite playmate.
So call now for Playboy and your free video.
And discover our secrets, because we want to make you happy.
BET.
It happened 7 hours and 25 minutes ago, roughly, maybe 7 hours, 24 minutes. The it was an earthquake, and now 17 people are confirmed dead. The earthquake struck Southern California this morning. Let's look at this report from Deborah Zara.
It rattled millions of people from their sleep around 4:30 Monday morning. A powerful earthquake centered in Northridge in the San Fernando Valley, roughly 20 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles. Homes and apartment buildings crumbled, some freeways collapsed, train cars derailed and flipped over. Police and fire officials believe dozens of people could still be trapped in their cars or homes. Governor Pete Wilson already is asking the Federal Emergency Management Agency for help.
All of a sudden, the whole station started shaking.
Something of an irony that in a town that whose main industry is to recreate drama, this has been a year where we didn't need much of the fiction. We have so much reality going on that it's quite amazing. That was just, as you said, around the corner from where I'm sitting now. Here in the Bureau, we've had not a lot of damage, but everything's off the walls in the library, and I haven't even been up to my office. Actually, I just happened to think of that. I should go up and see if there are any paintings left on the walls.
And tell me, in terms of the aftershocks, you've experienced quite a few of them. You've told me about them either as they're happening or shortly after they've happened. So far, they seem to have been very, very mild, but there is still the danger, of course, and the prediction that there will be worse ones.
That's correct, and they're saying that within the next 72-hour period, we could have aftershocks that are as large as 5 on the Richter scale. Now, don't throw me any more questions about how that works out scientifically, but I can tell you that a 5 on a Richter scale would be enough to stop regular programming in Los Angeles for a cut-in of news. That's a big quake here on any normal day. Today, it's an aftershock. A few weeks from now, it'll be big news again, probably.
Judy, let's eavesdrop on what our colleagues over at WABC are doing. That's a live picture from the WABC helicopter. WABC is here on the East Coast, KABC in Los Angeles. Let's pick up on what they're talking about.
Busy trying to check on the structural integrity of the places they expect to open as shelters for tonight. And so there's not a complete list of those shelters yet, but if you want information, here's a number you can call. I'm not sure.
Heard the interview in Los Angeles with a water authority expert who said, please boil your water, as people in Los Angeles are being advised to do, and recommended against any attempts at self-purification. Chlorine pills are one method for doing that, but any reference that was overheard to adding bleach to water was ruled as extremely unwise. So that is the bottom line. Very unwise. Don't try self-purification. We will be continuing and
now, what is... I'm not altogether clear whether it really is a new fault line or simply one that they had not detected before, but as you see those concentric circles, that is the epicenter there where the arrow is, Northridge in the San Fernando Valley, and it is in that region that houses were collapsed in on themselves, buildings have collapsed in on themselves, sections of highway have collapsed in on themselves, where earlier this morning there were natural gas leaks which ultimately exploded into fires and wiped out whole neighborhoods there. The fire department not only had the problem of access, of trying to reach the area, but also had the problem of being afraid to extinguish the fires because the natural gas itself constitutes more of a danger because you can't see it, you can't smell it, and there it is. And it can be terribly toxic. But most of those fires now appear to be out. We have heard from one of our experts with whom we've spoken throughout the course of the day that, of course, the problems yet to come down the road, reestablishing, I mean, you're going to get water lines and sewer lines that are going to be mixing in with one another. That's going to constitute a major problem in the days and weeks to come, but it's the kind of problem you don't focus on until the immediate disaster is handled and taken care of. Gentlemen, tell me where we're going to be able to go from here on in. We were going to show you a piece of video of the tape room. This is part of the General Hospital set, which is actually, well, Judy Muller, if you're there, this is literally just a few feet from where you're sitting. Why don't you describe this for us?
Well, yes, this is the studio on this lot where we also have our news bureau here in, well, it's East Hollywood, basically. And they've had a partial roof collapsed at the studio of General Hospital, as well as a water main break, and so it's flooded. I don't believe they were set to tape today because it's a holiday. They tape a few days a week and then are gone. So I don't know what this will do to the schedule of General Hospital, but it's
many state highways that have been affected here this morning. But again, I-10 is a federal interstate highway. So Mike and Linda, it'll be fixed a lot quicker than the others.
Better than we thought.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting that the retrofitting of the freeways and the structural repair and I guess prevention they're doing that now. It's ongoing. So there's still areas that are very, very vulnerable.
There certainly are, and in the days and the weeks ahead, as you're sitting there in traffic, because you've been routed around one of these areas and it's taking you so much longer to get to work, I doubt if you will have too many reservations about your tax dollars going to retrofit these freeways.
A very vivid picture.
Here you see what happens when you don't.
Right. And this is, although it is amazing to think that it's only going to take about 6 to 8 months to get that going. You're seeing some just some little headlines here on the screen to help you know what's going on, what we do know now. Of course, major power outages throughout the Southern California, Los Angeles area. Major gas leaks. They are the reason for most of the fires that we have seen and been showing you, especially in the San Fernando Valley around Northridge. A live picture right here of the nation's busiest freeway cut down.
Although you were talking about this retrofitting, even that is no guarantee. We've had a couple of freeways collapse this morning that were fairly new freeways. The 14 collapsed at the 5, the 118 freeway collapsed.
Those were east-west freeways.
Those were east, and those were the ones that were the most vulnerable, although the seismic expert who joined us a little while ago, but this seismic expert told us that even our best buildings and freeways are vulnerable. And those are the newer ones, of course, but those that are not as new, middle-aged or older buildings, those are really, really dangerous in the event of an earthquake and unpredictable. And we cannot, we've asked a couple of a structural engineer and a seismic expert